Welcome to one of the most haunting stories in Kentucky's history. Before we begin, drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and the exact time you're listening. We're curious to know where and when these tales reach you. The year was 1903, and autumn had settled over Harlan County with an unusual chill. The mining town of Cumberland Gap lay quiet between the rolling hills, its air thick with coal dust and secrets. To strangers, it was just another forgotten mining town. But locals knew the truth. They knew about the hollow beyond Raven Rock, where the Hollow brothers once lived. Even today, hunters refuse to go there after sunset. County records from November 1903 note only that Thomas and Elijah Hollow were declared missing. The investigation lasted 3 weeks before it was suddenly closed. No bodies, no suspects, just a boarded-up cabin at the edge of Black Mountain Hollow, and a town that collectively chose silence. The records never explain why search parties stopped after the first week, or why the sheriff's handwriting trembled in his final report. It's as if everyone agreed to forget, but some stories don't stay buried. According to the Cumberland Gap Register, the Hollow brothers arrived in town in 1897 during the coal boom. They were tall, gaunt men who looked almost identical despite being 5 years apart. Thomas the elder spoke for both, while Elijah rarely said a word. They bought a small plot of land far from town, built their cabin by hand, and kept to themselves. Decades later, a rediscovered deed revealed that their land once belonged to the Blackwood family, who abandoned it after a mining accident killed 3 sons in 1889. Locals said the property was cursed, its ravine forever shrouded in fog. The brothers bought it for a shockingly low price, paying in new coins that the clerk described as cold to the touch, as though they'd been buried underground. Their arrival coincided with a period of chaos. The railroad had brought industry outsiders and danger. In that flood of change, the Hollow brothers should have been invisible, but they never were. Store ledgers from 1897 show they bought 40 pounds of salt, no food, and asked for old maps, especially of the caves nearby. One watched the street while the other spoke, neither ever removing their hats. They worked the night shift at the Blue Diamond mine, a schedule most men avoided. Their foreman called them tireless, but said they made the others uneasy. They never missed a shift, never complained, and never seemed to sleep. Whitley's personal journal, unearthed in 1965 during his grandson's estate sale, offered a far more unsettling account of the Hollow brothers. "The Hollow men work like no miners I've ever seen," he wrote. "They need almost no light move through the tightest tunnels, as if they can see in the dark and somehow know where the coal runs before we even start digging. The other miners won't work beside them anymore. Their picks strike the rock in perfect rhythm even when they're far apart, like 2 bodies sharing one mind." What made them even more mysterious was how little they existed outside their work. No church ever listed them in its congregation, a rarity in a town where faith was life. The general store kept only the barest records of their purchases. Salt oil nails, nothing more. Samuel Burke, the town photographer, claimed the brothers refused to appear in group photos. The only known image is from an 1899 town gathering, where a tall, thin figure stands at the edge of the frame, face turned away, blurred almost beyond recognition. In 1967, experts from the University of Kentucky examined the photo. Their report noted that the figure appeared unnaturally long, roughly 15 to 20% taller than those nearby, and that the light around it bent in ways that defied physics. The grain of the photo showed burn-like distortion, as if the film had been exposed to intense heat, but only in that one spot. By all accounts, the Hollow brothers should have vanished into obscurity like so many miners before them, but instead, they became central to what locals later called the silence that saved Cumberland Gap. Land survey maps from 1898 revealed their cabin stood where three strange formations met a limestone ridge to the north, a disappearing underground stream, and a circular fog pit known as the Witch's Cauldron. The location broke every old Appalachian superstition about where a home should be built. It couldn't be seen from the main road. It sat where three shadows met at noon, and no direct path led to it, just a twisting trail that seemed to loop back on itself. Martha Jenkins, a midwife and folk healer, wrote about it in her 1897 almanac, "The Newcomers Built Where No House Should Stand." The Blackwood land remembers too much. The earth there holds no footprints, and seeds sprout white and crooked. They either don't know or don't care. The brothers lived by routine night shifts at the mine, quiet trips to town once a week, and long hours shut away in their cabin. Thomas occasionally visited the county office, poring over maps and records, searching for land surveys from the 1780s and making notes about areas marked unexplored or hazardous. For nearly 6 years, they kept to themselves, drawing no attention until 1899, when Thomas applied for a permit to dig a deep well on their property. County Surveyor William Hayes approved it, but noted uneasily in his report that the depth requested far exceeded what was reasonable for water. The excavation request from Thomas Hollow raised concerns even before the trouble began. County Surveyor William Hayes noted in his 1899 report, "Applicant insists on excavation exceeding 60 feet far, beyond any water table requirement." When questioned, he stated the added depth was necessary for temperature regulation. Geological concerns noted, but permit granted due to the property's isolation. For years, that detail seemed trivial. Then came August of 1903. The first sign that something was wrong appears in the journal of Dr. William Forrester, Cumberland Gap's only physician, whose notes were uncovered in 1965 during renovations to his old office. His entry from August 17th reads, "Called to the Collins farm after young Peter Collins, age 19, was found wandering Shawnee Trail in extreme distress. No physical injuries. The boy is unresponsive, but aware his eyes follow movement, yet he does not speak. His mother reports he'd gone hunting near Black Mountain Hollow 3 days prior. Forrester sedated Peter and advised rest, but his next entry a week later is darker. August 24th. No change. The boy panicked when shown a map, tearing it apart when asked to mark where he'd been. His fear of darkness is profound. As the sun sets, his agitation escalates to violence. Must be restrained at night. Peter Collins was well known in town, an honest, good-natured young man, a deacon at church engaged to marry Emma Whitaker that fall. His sudden collapse into silence shocked the community and marked the beginning of Cumberland Gap's strangest chapter. In 1968, the Harland Historical Society interviewed Emma, then an old woman who recalled, "The Peter that came back wasn't my Peter." His eyes didn't focus right, like he was looking past you at something you couldn't see. His skin was ice cold no matter how many blankets we used. The doctor called it shock, but it was more like something in him got left behind in those woods. As August turned to September, strange reports spread. Livestock disappeared from 3 farms bordering the hollow. Hunters complained the woods had gone silent, no birds, no insects, no wind. Franklin Moore, one of the last living witnesses from that time, described it best in a 1968 interview. That silence wasn't natural. You could hear your heartbeat, like the whole forest was listening with you, waiting. On September 8th, Samuel Millbrook wrote in his journal, "Lost 6 sheep last night. No signs of a fight. Gate unlatched. They didn't run, something led them away." 4 days later, 12-year-old Sarah Thompson told her father she saw a man made of shadows standing at the edge of their property near the hollow. Her father, Joseph Thompson, wrote to his brother in Louisville. She said it smiled with too many teeth before stepping back into the trees. "We found narrow boot prints in the mud, too deep, like whoever made them weighed more than a man should. Through it all, the Hollow brothers kept working the night shifts at the Blue Diamond mine. But people began to notice subtle changes. Thomas stopped speaking entirely, while Elijah, once silent, started humming old Appalachian hymns that echoed eerily through the tunnels. Their foreman, Jacob Whitley, noted in his September entries, "The eastern shaft, where the Hollow men work alone, yields impossible amounts of coal. 2 men cannot produce this volume even with double shifts. Stranger still, the coal burns blue, gives off intense heat, and leaves no ash." The company praised their output. The miners whispered of a curse, and the silence in Cumberland Gap deepened. Only a fine black powder remained from the Hollow brothers' coal, a residue the wind itself refused to scatter. Then came September 28, 1903. A minor earthquake rippled through the region, brief, harmless, but deeply strange. At that very moment, every clock in Cumberland Gap stopped for exactly 12 minutes before resuming as if nothing had happened. The phenomenon appeared in several journals, including the writings of Reverend Howard Grant, who noted Brother Simmons came to me in distress. His pocket watch froze at 2:17, then jumped forward to 2, bent to 29. I dismissed it until Mrs. Abernathy reported the same, and I found my own clock matched theirs to the minute. Perhaps time itself is not as fixed as we believe. 2 weeks later, on October 12th, the mine logs recorded a chilling event. T and E Hollow failed to emerge from shaft 7 at end of shift. Search found nothing. Reappeared 3 hours later. Clothing soaked through no water present in section. Thomas requested a month's leave that same day, granted without question, given their spotless record. That night, another tremor rippled beneath Black Mountain. The operator at the Cumberland Gap telegraph office, Miles Crawford, wrote in his report, "Seismic disturbance registered. 13 a.m. Signal interrupted 3 minutes. On return, lines emitted high-pitched tone for 17 seconds. For 2 weeks, no one saw the Hollow brothers in town. Yet distant watchers said smoke still rose from their chimney each night, curling blue against the moonlight. Then on October 28th, Dr. Forrester made a peculiar note in his journal. "Sheriff Parsons consulted me today regarding Thomas Hollow, who appeared at his office with an unusual request. He asked for authorization to exhume a grave. When asked whose Hollow replied, 'No one is buried there yet.' The request was denied, but Parsons later told Forrester that Hollow's expression was unnervingly calm, his gaze distant, as if fixed on something unseen. The unease in Cumberland Gap deepened. Peter Collins remained mute, unresponsive to the world. Hunting dogs vanished near the Hollow, and on the night of November 2nd, strange lights were seen over the Hollow cabin, cold blue and pulsing like a living thing. Martin Weber, a railroad night watchman, gave the clearest account. A blue glow rose from the chimney and spread across the trees. The forest bent away from it. The air felt thick, like breathing through glass. My lantern flame froze solid, then went out completely when the light faded. The next morning brought the first frost of the season weeks early, and with it frost patterns unlike any seen before. Farmers awoke to find perfect circles, spirals, and lines resembling strange writing etched across barns and windows, all facing toward the Hollow. On November 4th, Thomas Hollow returned to town for the last time. He sent a telegram to an unknown recipient in Boston. The paper burst into flames moments after transmission. But Operator Crawford remembered the addressee, the Department of Anthropology at Miskatonic University, an institution with no official record of ever existing. That same evening, Elijah appeared at Dr. Forrester's home alone. He spoke calmly, the doctor wrote, requested a copy of Harrington's Anatomical Divergences in Isolated Communities. When I inquired why, he replied, "Confirmation, doctor. We must be certain of the limits of the human form." I refused. He thanked me politely, then said, "It matters little. We have found a better vessel." The entry ends abruptly. The next page in Forrester's journal begins simply, November 5th, 1903. Everything changed. The Cumberland Gap Register headline told the public only part of the story. A fire at the Blue Diamond Mine had killed 7 men. But hidden on page 3 was a brief, almost overlooked note. Thomas and Elijah Hollow had disappeared from their home under unusual disturbance. The fire erupted in Shaft 7, the very section where the brothers had worked for years. Company records listed its start at exactly 3:17 a.m., a time when no miners were scheduled to be underground. Survivors described not flames, but a suffocating blackness that devoured their lantern light and pressed in from all sides. Of the 12 who entered to fight the blaze and search for survivors, only 5 emerged. Sheriff Parsons organized a search party the next morning. The hollow cabin was found in chaos, furniture overturned, belongings scattered. But the most startling detail lay beneath the floorboards. Someone had pried up the planks of the main room and dug a 6-foot-deep pit into the earth. The official report ended there, noting only that a storm forced the team to abandon the search. But Dr. Forrester's journal revealed what really lay in that pit. Parsons had come to him at dusk, pale and shaken. He spoke of items retrieved from the hole, personal effects belonging to townspeople who had no known connection to the brothers. Mrs. Whitaker's hairbrush, a Schmidt child's toy, Judge Harmon's pocket watch. None of these items had been reported missing. More chilling were the dozens of small cloth pouches found in the pit. Each contained soil labeled with the names of different households in the county, as if the brothers had been collecting pieces of the town. The pit walls bore symbols unlike anything Forrester had seen outside academic texts on prehistoric cave paintings. Except here they were arranged with a mathematical precision that felt purposeful, deliberate. The well the brothers were granted permission to dig in 1899 was gone. Instead, the excavation extended horizontally beneath the cabin, with signs of tunneling in multiple directions. No soil was piled outside. Where had all that earth gone? The next day, the search expanded into the surrounding woods. There, about 400 yards north of the cabin, Deputy James Crawford documented what locals would later call the Circle. It was a clearing not marked on any forest map, perfectly around 30 feet in diameter, barren of vegetation, the soil scorched without signs of fire. At its center stood a crude stone altar. Evidence logs marked Nurse 7 described the items found atop the altar. But these details were sealed until 1950 and have never been publicly released. What we do know comes from a private letter Crawford sent to his brother in 1966. "I cannot say what we found," he wrote. "I swore an oath like all the others, but it defied natural law. Objects hung in the air with no support, metal fused with stone, organic matter twisting into shapes no science explains. And everywhere those markings the same as beneath the cabin, but larger, more complex." The sheriff ordered everything photographed and destroyed on sight. Burke, the photographer, refused to develop the plates. He smashed them with a hammer and threw the pieces into the river. Smart man. After that, the search party refused to return. Parsons wrote in his final report that conditions have rendered further investigation impossible, though weather records show clear skies that week. Around this same time, Peter Collins, silent for nearly 3 months, began to speak again. Dr. Forrester recorded the moment on November 9th, called to Collins' farm at dawn. Patient speaking incoherently, words troubling. Peter's ramblings were fragmented but consistent. He spoke of the brothers who weren't brothers and of what they called up from the deep place. He said, They aren't missing. They're multiplying. Forrester recommended immediate transfer to the state hospital in Lexington. The doctor's notes include chilling fragments of Peter's words. They found a door that shouldn't be opened. Not brothers. Same man split across time. Collector and collected. They need 13 to complete the pattern. I was to be one, but my mind wouldn't bend. The others will be more suitable. They sing to what waits below. It listens. It's so hungry after sleeping so long. His ravings were dismissed as trauma. But over the next 3 days, 7 more residents of Cumberland Gap began showing the same symptoms, staring past people as if it's something invisible flinching from darkness, speaking in broken fragments about hunger patterns and a presence beneath the earth. The outbreaks of strange behavior only grew worse after November 1903. Residents who fell ill cycled between long stretches of catatonic silence and frenzied, almost prophetic speech about the pattern and the awakening. The one constant was chilling every afflicted household, had been among those whose soil samples were found beneath the Hollow brothers' cabin. Peter Collins, now the central figure of the mystery, was ordered transferred to a state hospital in Lexington, but he never arrived. The transport wagon was discovered empty on Wilderness Road, its driver and passenger gone without a trace. The incident was briefly investigated, but ultimately filed away with the dozens of unsolved disappearances that defined the region's lawless years. Months later, Oliver Blackburn, a conductor for the Louisville and Nashville Railroad, told Sheriff Parsons he had seen Peter Collins boarding a northbound train the very day of his disappearance. It was Collins, no doubt, he said, but he weren't alone. Tall man in black accompanied him, face hidden by his hat. The strange thing was how they moved perfectly in step, like invisible strings held them together. Collins's eyes were open, but empty. Didn't respond when I called his name. By November 15th, the official search for the Hollow brothers was closed. Their property was seized by the county for unpaid taxes, though records prove their taxes were fully paid. The cabin was boarded up. That same evening, a town meeting was held at the Cumberland Gap Courthouse. No official minutes survive. But a letter from Eleanor Simmons to her sister in Louisville, dated November 16th, paints a grim picture. The meeting last night was unlike anything I've witnessed, she wrote. Sheriff Parsons spoke of putting recent events behind us without ever naming them. Judge Harmon then proposed a pact of silence for the good of the town. No vote was taken, but everyone understood. We are not to speak of the Hollow brothers again to our children, to outsiders, not even to each other. Most unsettling was Peter Collins' mother sitting in the back row, weeping silently as everyone looked away. The strangest moment came when Reverend Grant tried to lead a prayer. As soon as he said, "Protect us from evil," every lantern in the courthouse dimmed at once. Judge Harmon adjourned immediately. As we filed out, I saw the courthouse clock fixed at 8:45, but the church bell had just struck midnight. Cumberland Gap then chose to forget. The Hollow brothers became unmentionable, the boarded cabin treated as a place of superstition. Children were hushed if they asked. Outsiders who inquired were met with blank stares and careful misdirection. But forgetting isn't resolution. Within weeks of the brothers' disappearance, subtle changes rippled through the community. The Cumberland Gap Register issue of December 7th, 1903, was riddled with typographical errors, letters inverted or replaced in such a way that when mapped across the whole paper, formed the same symbols found beneath the hollow cabin. Its editor, Harrison Wells, resigned the next day without explanation and moved to Cincinnati. At the Blue Diamond Mine, something stranger still occurred. Coal from Shaft 7. The site of the fire suddenly tested at nearly twice the thermal efficiency of normal coal. The company, despite worker protests, expanded operations there. Before year's end, 3 more miners vanished in that shaft. Official reports blamed cave-ins, but no bodies were ever recovered. The decades that followed became known as the bad years. Between 1904 and 1910, the mine suffered 3 catastrophic collapses, killing 46 men. A tuberculosis outbreak in 1907 decimated the population. And the census recorded an unusually high rate of unexplained disappearances, people who simply vanished, often after reporting strange dreams or the feeling of being watched. Even more disturbing was what happened to the next generation. School records from 1904 to 1910 reveal that children born after November 1903 displayed unusual traits. Teacher Mary Sinclair's notes, preserved in the Cumberland Gap School archives, state, "They rarely speak among themselves. Their performance in mathematics and sciences far exceeds the curriculum. Most troubling is their collective behavior. They move in unison without visible signals. During certain astronomical events, full moons, eclipses, they cannot be roused from a deep trance-like sleep." Through all of this, the Hollow Brothers' cabin stood untouched, slowly reclaimed by vines and fog. In 1921, a lightning strike reportedly burned what remained to the ground. No one went to see. By then, the cabin had become less a place than a warning, and the silence around the Hollow Brothers was total. Though no official fire department record confirms it, the Hollow Land was never resold or redeveloped. Most locals assumed it was unstable ground, cursed maybe, but in 1917, the Kentucky Department of Mining briefly investigated the site as a potential coal seam. Their official report dismissed it as unsuitable due to unstable ground conditions. But the field journal of the survey leader, Dr. Howard Mitchell, told another story. Instrumentation malfunctions in proximity to the target site. Magnetic compasses spin wildly. Film exposed despite sealed containers. Most significant temperature gradient inverted near original cabin site. Ground temperature increases with elevation rather than depth, reaching 57 degrees at surface despite ambient air at 34. Recommend area restricted, not for instability, but for phenomena beyond known geological explanation. Through the 1920s and 30s, the area remained untouched. Hunters who strayed too close reported strange disorientation watches, ticking backward compasses pointing north and south at once, and an unshakable sense of being followed. In 1931, a trapper named Wesley Harmon vanished for 3 days in those woods, despite knowing the terrain since childhood. When searchers found him dehydrated and frostbitten, his account, recorded by Dr. James Lewis at the Cumberland Gap Medical Center, was disturbing. He claimed the trees moved when not watched directly, and that the ground itself rearranged overnight, erasing his trail markers. Most unsettling was his insistence that he saw the hollow cabin standing whole again, smoke rising from its chimney. The cabin, according to town record, had burned a decade earlier. In 1944, historian Margaret Fowler from the University of Kentucky came to Cumberland Gap to research industrial mining communities. She quickly encountered an impenetrable wall of silence. Her journal entry from April 18th reads, "The locals' refusal to discuss certain events borders on pathological. Elderly residents physically withdraw when pressed. The librarian claims all records from 1903 were destroyed in a flood. Yet no such flood exists in town archives." The son of former Deputy Crawford told me, "Some stories don't belong in books, Miss Fowler. Some were buried for good reason." Fowler persisted, tracking down former residents who had left the region. She uncovered references to Dr. Forrester's missing journal and the sealed deputy reports, fragments of a story the town had fought to erase. But by May, her tone shifted. "Strange occurrences are becoming too frequent to ignore," she wrote. "My room searched twice. Letters never reach colleagues. Recurrent dreams the same each night." A circular clearing, a stone altar, symbols I cannot read but somehow understand. Always wake at 3:17 a.m. Her final entry, dated June 30th, 1944, read, "Tomorrow I visit the hollow site. Local resistance has been extreme, warnings, threats. Still I must see it for myself. Jack Lamont has agreed to guide me, but refuses to stay past sundown." She never finished her book. University records show she took indefinite leave for health reasons and relocated to Arizona, where family members said she burned all her research before her death in 1967. The only surviving account of that day came from Lamont's sworn statement. "We reached the hollow property around noon, nothing left but forest." She took photos, soil samples, normal stuff. Around 2, she found a corroded metal box near the old foundation. I told her to leave it, but she pried it open. Inside were papers yellowed and brittle. She read for maybe 5 minutes, said nothing, then packed everything up fast. Her hands were shaking. She kept looking over her shoulder. On the walk back, she stopped, grabbed my arm and whispered, "They're still here. They never left. The brothers are still watching." She made me promise never to return. The story might have remained buried forever until 1968. During a highway expansion near the old hollow, workers unearthed a rusted metal box filled with personal effects, among them a journal belonging to Elijah Hollow himself. The discovery shut down the site for days. Foreman Russell Jenkins noted in his daily log that one operator, Vernon Mills, refused to keep working, claiming his excavator fought against him when digging near the find. 3 other workers quit that same day without collecting their pay. County Historical Society representatives gathered the artifacts from the highway excavation, but the disturbances didn't end with their removal. Machinery broke without cause, diesel engines stalled, and electrical systems failed. The project fell 2 weeks behind schedule. Elijah Hollow's journal was sent to the Kentucky Historical Society for safekeeping, only to vanish from their archives in 1969. Before it disappeared, however, the archivist who cataloged it, Catherine Benson, left detailed notes. She described the journal as written in a hybrid of English and a personal cipher so complex that most of its contents were indecipherable. Yet certain phrases appeared repeatedly: the transaction, the exchange, what waits in the spaces between. One complete passage stood out. Benson transcribed it word for word. "Thomas says we must not be greedy. Says power requires patience. But I have seen what comes through when the conditions are right, and I cannot wait any longer. The soil holds memory. The darkness holds form. And soon, we will hold everything." Shortly afterward, Benson resigned. In a letter to the Society's director, she wrote, "I can no longer continue this work in good conscience. The Hollow Journal is not merely a historical document. It is actively malignant. Since working with it, I've experienced time loss, recurring numerical fixations, and most disturbingly, I've begun finding pages in my own handwriting, perfect imitations of the journal's cipher, with no memory of writing them. I strongly recommend it be secured away from public access, or preferably destroyed." Before the journal vanished, several other artifacts from the metal box were photographed and cataloged. Among them, a pocket watch with added hands and strange markings designed to track celestial movements instead of time. A set of surveyor's tools engraved with the same symbols found beneath the hollow cabin. 13 cloth pouches of soil samples, one labeled Final Repository 13 of 13. And a daguerreotype showing what appeared to be the same man twice, posed side by side with subtle differences in his expression. Then, in 1972, a speleological survey of the Black Mountain region revealed something astonishing: an extensive cave system directly beneath the old hollow property. These caves displayed properties that defied known geology: perfectly smooth walls. In certain sections, a constant temperature of 57 degrees, regardless of depth, and large deposits of rare earth minerals not typical of Kentucky limestone formations. Dr. Lawrence Hodge, who led the survey, published a single paper on the caves before abruptly abandoning his research. His field notes, obtained decades later under a Freedom of Information Act request, reveal why. The cave system appears artificial in sections, yet shows no tool marks or blasting. Certain chambers exhibit perfect acoustics. A whisper at one end carries 100 feet. Most disturbing is the central chamber, where all electronic equipment failed simultaneously, and team members reported disorientation and temporary memory loss. Our local guide refused to enter this chamber, saying it was where they called it through. The legend of the Hollow Brothers occasionally resurfaced in the years that followed. In 1982, a folklore student from the University of Kentucky recorded interviews with elderly residents of Harlan County. Their stories contradicted official records. Some claimed the brothers had been seen in the region as early as the 1870s, never aging. Others swore the two men weren't brothers at all, but one man split across time, or the same man in two bodies. As one 93-year-old former miner put it, they weren't born, they were called. Someone wished for help in those mines, made a bargain they didn't understand. And what came wasn't human, not really. It just wore humanity like ill-fitting clothes. Edith Blackwood, the last surviving member of the family who originally owned the land where the Hollow Brothers built their cabin, gave her testimony to the Appalachian Oral History Project in 1983, months before her death at age 97. Her words added a darker dimension to the story. My grandfather told me things he wouldn't tell the authorities. Said before they sold that land, they found things on it that weren't right. A circle of stones that rearranged themselves overnight. A spring that ran clear during the day, but black as ink under moonlight. And once a man came to the door during a storm. His footprints in the mud had no toes, just smooth ovals like a doll's feet. She went on, grandfather said. When the Hollow men came to buy the land, he recognized the taller one. Swore it was the same strange visitor from 30 years earlier, unchanged, not a day older. He sold the land cheap to be rid of it. Said some places aren't meant to be lived on, just lived under. That statement aligns with the original sale documents. When researchers examined them in 1987, they found an unprecedented clause. The undersigned seller acknowledges that this transfer includes all mineral, subterranean, and atmospheric rights in perpetuity, and forfeits any claim to discoveries or manifestations arising from the property, regardless of their nature or value. No other transaction in Harlan County from that period contains similar language. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the Hollow remained largely unexplored. It was folded into the Cumberland Gap National Historical Park in 1985, but rangers informally marked it as a low-priority patrol zone despite its proximity to hiking trails. Internal Park Service memos released under the Freedom of Information Act reveal repeated incidents of disoriented hikers near the site. One such report from 1989 by Ranger David Martinez reads, responded to report of lost hikers near Hollow Ridge Trail. Located subjects approximately 2 miles from reported location, though they claimed not to have moved. Both severely dehydrated despite adequate water. Watches stopped at exactly 3:17. Both reported hearing mining sounds, pickaxes striking stone though miles from any active mine. Even today, the phenomena continue. Every November 5th since 1904, Cumberland Gap experiences unusual electrical disturbances, power fluctuations, communication blackouts, equipment failures. Modern monitoring has confirmed a consistent electromagnetic anomaly centered on the former hollow property each year on that date. Meteorological records show another oddity: storms split and flow around the hollow, leaving it drier than surrounding land. Local farmers call it the dry shadow or the thirsty ground. In 1997, a group of college students camping near the site reported a night of lost time. They pitched camp at 4:09 p.m., and their next clear memory was being back at their cars at 7:00 a.m. with no recollection of the intervening hours. All of their watches had stopped at exactly midnight. Their story might have been dismissed as a prank, if not for the evidence. Their tents, gear, and backpacks were scattered across a half-mile radius, some items embedded in tree branches 30 feet high. The medical reports from Cumberland Gap Regional Hospital were even stranger. All 6 students presented identical symptoms: elevated core temperatures of precisely 101.3 degrees, dilated pupils, unresponsive to light, and MRI scans showing unusual activity in the same region of their brains. Dr. Rebecca Chen, the neurologist who examined them, wrote, "The synchronized neural activity in all 6 patients defies conventional explanation. The pattern suggests some form of external entrainment of brain waves, similar to what we might see with transcranial magnetic stimulation, but far more precise and affecting deeper brain structures." All 6 later reported the same recurring dream: a circular clearing, a stone altar, and a low voice singing beneath the earth. The students all described the same dream, descending endless stairs into darkness while hearing their names whispered from below. When their footage was recovered, every image was ruined. Film reels came back overexposed. Digital files were corrupted beyond repair. But one student's handheld recorder captured something that survived beneath the static: 2 male voices singing in perfect unison, performing an old Appalachian mining song from the 1880s that had never been commercially recorded. Today, the Cumberland Gap Historical Society maintains no record of the Hollow brothers. When asked, staff politely redirect visitors to safer topics: local coal history, railway expansion, pioneer settlement. In 2010, the town council quietly passed an ordinance prohibiting any form of excavation on the unmarked site of the brothers' former property, citing environmental protection. Yet for those who dig through the archives, a strange pattern emerges: a steady, deliberate erasure. Town records since 1903 show entire sections missing or altered. Library books have pages cut out exactly where that period's mining history would have been described. Survey maps, redrawn over decades, show subtle but consistent differences in topography. Even cemetery plots were rearranged. The erasure goes beyond paper. Residents display what psychologists call a collective blind spot. They can recount Cumberland Gap's entire mining history in vivid detail, but when asked about the Hollow brothers, their eyes glaze over. They pause, then resume, as if the question was never asked. Dr. James Wilkins, a linguistics professor who studied Appalachian storytelling in 2007, documented what he called a structural silence. "It's not what the people say," he wrote, "it's what they avoid saying." When conversation nears certain subjects, the events of late 1903, or the area now listed as watershed protection land speakers, subconsciously restructure their sentences to circle around the topic. It's as if the absence itself has become part of their grammar. His recordings showed this linguistic deflection in every generation, from teenagers to elders in their 90s. In 2012, an environmental research team from Eastern Kentucky University placed seismic monitors throughout the region. The station closest to the Hollow site recorded rhythmic microseismic activity at perfect 17-minute intervals between 3:03 and 4:05 a.m. each night. The attached audio sensors picked up faint repetitive impacts consistent with mining tools striking stone. There hasn't been an active mine within 10 miles of that area for over 70 years. After 3 weeks, the equipment failed. When retrieved, every metal component was magnetized in impossible opposing polarities. Dr. Andrea Morrison, who led the study, requested funds for further investigation. Her proposal was denied without explanation. So what really happened to Thomas and Elijah Hollow? The record says they vanished, like so many others swallowed by the wild hills of early Appalachia. But the silence of an entire community hints at something deeper. Something so unsettling that generations have agreed not to remember. Not all the traces were erased. During the winter storm of 1965, an elderly man checked himself into Pineville Medical Center, suffering from exposure. He gave his name only as Thomas. The attending physician noted the man appeared decades older than his claimed age of 98. He muttered constantly about the other one getting loose. Nurses found him wandering the halls at night, always facing north toward Cumberland Gap. They reported hearing him whisper in two distinct voices, as if holding a conversation with himself. Dr. Harold Jenkins, who treated him, kept private notes never entered into the official record. The man called Thomas exhibits conditions beyond explanation. Body temperature a constant 94.6 degrees regardless of environment. X-rays show abnormal bone density more consistent with mineral composite than human structure. Blood analysis reveals hemoglobin irregularities and cellular formations not found in any known species. If I didn't know better, I'd say he isn't entirely human. The patient died 3 days later. No relatives were located. His only possession was a small cloth pouch labeled Cumberland Gap 1903, containing a handful of black soil. Hospital records confirm his body decomposed at an impossible rate, reduced to an unrecognizable organic residue within hours, despite refrigeration. He was buried in an unmarked grave. The coordinates of that burial were later lost when the hospital expanded its grounds. But every November 5th, Pineville staff still report flickering lights, failing equipment, and faint sounds beneath the floors. Steady rhythmic like pickaxes striking stone. Dr. Jenkins had noted one final disturbing detail. Every medical staffer who touched the man calling himself Thomas later developed the same symptoms: insomnia, sleeping, aligned to specific compass directions, and vivid dreams of descending staircases into darkness. In 1978, when Pineville Cemetery expanded, construction crews uncovered an empty coffin at the spot where records showed Thomas had been buried. Inside was only a thin layer of black powder and a small cloth pouch of soil. The discovery was kept quiet, and county records were altered to indicate a different burial location. Through the following decades, reports surfaced from time to time peculiar encounters in the hills around Cumberland Gap. Hikers whispered of tall, thin men appearing on remote trails, asking strange questions about cave depths and soil composition. Miners working the few remaining shafts swore they sometimes heard two male voices singing in harmony from abandoned tunnels. Most often, residents described dreams of being watched by identical figures standing motionless at the edges of their property. In 2015, a University of Tennessee archaeology student, Michael Reynolds, became fascinated by the Hollow brothers after discovering references in his great-grandfather's journal. Ignoring warnings from locals, he conducted ground-penetrating radar surveys at the cabin site. His findings were never formally published, but emails to his faculty advisor recovered after his disappearance in 2016 described something extraordinary. The subsurface imaging shows a structure extending at least 300 feet below the surface, he wrote. Far deeper than any mining operation in the early 1900s. The formation has perfect symmetry, appears to be hollow, with walls of unusual density. Most strange scans taken 3 days apart show the internal dimensions changing, as if the structure is slowly expanding. Reynolds vanished on November 5, 2016. His backpack and equipment were found neatly arranged in a perfect circle near the old Hollow property. No other trace of him was ever discovered. Even now, The region holds on to its secrets. Compasses spin without finding north. Watches run backward. Hunters feel eyes on them from the trees. Dogs refuse to enter certain parts of the forest. Parents still warn their children never go into the hollow after dark. Never answer if you hear someone calling your name from among the trees. And never ever speak of the brothers who once lived there, because some stories don't end when we stop telling them. Some wait patiently in the dark for someone to speak them back into existence. Modern scientific instruments occasionally register strange phenomena at the site, unexplained radiation signatures, localized magnetic fields, and what one physicist called temporal inconsistencies. Moments where atomic clocks briefly desynchronize inside the hollow's perimeter. Yet these findings remain largely absent from the literature, their researchers quietly abandoning their studies after only preliminary investigations. And so, over a century later, the Hollow brothers remain unrecorded, but not gone part of a silence so complete it seems almost alive, a silence waiting to be broken. What is documented, however, is the strange demographic consistency of Cumberland Gap in the century following the Hollow brothers' disappearance. Census records show that despite economic collapse, outmigration, and the decline that emptied most Appalachian mining towns, Cumberland Gap's population has remained fixed at exactly 1013 residents in every census from 1910 to 2010. Births, deaths, and relocations should have altered those numbers. They never did. More unsettling is the town's extraordinarily high rate of identical twins, over 300%, above the national average according to a 2008 medical study, later retracted without explanation. Local physicians quietly noted that these twins often share unusual behaviors, synchronized speech patterns, identical handwriting, and recurring dreams, most describing the same descending staircase that appears again and again throughout the town's history. The Blue Diamond Mine officially closed in 1957, yet thermal imaging from periodic aerial surveys still shows faint heat signatures from deep underground, especially near Shaft 7, where the Hollow brothers once worked. Satellite photos sometimes capture pale blue light emissions from the sealed entrances, most often around the anniversary of their disappearance. In 2019, digital mapping revealed another anomaly. The exact coordinates of the old Hollow cabin appeared differently depending on the time of observation. Daytime satellite images show only dense forest, but night imaging sometimes reveals a clearing and the outline of a small structure. Analysts attempting to process these files reported that every digital copy became corrupted at precisely 3:17 a.m., regardless of the computer system used. Some say that if you stand at the edge of Cumberland Gap at dusk and listen closely, you can still hear singing from far below, old mining songs carried on the wind. A single voice that somehow sounds like two. Locals know better than to listen for long. They know that melodies can draw things closer. They know why no one speaks the Hollow brothers' names. Among the oldest families of Cumberland Gap, a whispered folk tale has endured. Never written down, passed from one generation to the next. It tells of a miner in the 1890s, trapped deep underground and facing certain death, who called out to the darkness for help. Something answered. It promised life prosperity and deliverance, in exchange for permission to experience the surface through him. The miner agreed, not understanding what he had invited. He survived the collapse without a scratch. But afterward, his reflection sometimes moved before he did. His shadow no longer matched his shape. Over time, the thing that had answered learned to divide, to shape itself to imitate. One day the miner was gone, and in his place were two men who looked almost, but not entirely alike. Two brothers who bought the land above the place where the bargain had been struck. Two brothers who began preparing for something that would take more than a lifetime to complete. Maybe it's only a story. A desperate attempt to explain what reason cannot. Or maybe somewhere deep beneath Cumberland Gap, something still waits, something that remembers the feel of sunlight and human skin that knows how to shape itself again when the time is right. Whatever truth lies buried there, the hollow endures a place where the ground shifts, the air hums, and the boundary between worlds grows thin. And when the wind blows from Black Mountain, when clocks hesitate at 3:17, when children dream of endless stairs, the old families remember. They remember the silence that once saved them. They remember the curse of the Hollow brothers.